You're listening to the Wedding Biz Network, the voice of the creative entrepreneur.
Come on, y'all!
Hey everyone, it's Andy Kushner, host of The Wedding Biz. This is another episode of The Next Level, in which I have a guest co-host, and together we talk about the interview of the week in order to kind of suss out some of the key topics and help translate them into some tactical strategies for you to use to bring your own business to the next level. And before I introduce today's guest co-host, I want to mention that last week's interview was with photographer Eric McVeigh, really wonderful out of Oregon, works worldwide, and we had planner Lori Aarons as the guest co-host, so check that out if you missed it. So today's guest co-host is a chance for me to bring back a wonderful friend and also consultant to my business, Sean Lowe. Hey, Sean, welcome back.
Hey, Andy, how are you?
Yeah, I'm great. So Sean's consulting firm, The Business of Being Creative, is focused on providing practical advice to those in the business of being creative. Sean's client list includes the who's who of the wedding industry and design community. Sean also hosts a wonderful podcast on the Wedding Biz Network called The Business of Being Creative, which comes out every Tuesday. Sean, I love your show. It's really doing great.
Thank you, Andy. I love making it. I can't believe we're coming up on another month or so, and it'll be a year.
Yeah, I know.
It's crazy.
I know. It's really hard to believe. So the guest that we're going to talk about today is Ira Levy, who is the creative director of Levy New York City Design and Production, an award-winning full-service design and production company focused on lighting, sound, and video for events. And so, Sean, in terms of first of all, at the beginning, I thought it was really funny. I didn't know this about Ira, that he actually majored in pre-med and then saw a Pretenders concert and changed everything. I thought that was funny as hell.
Oh, I thought that was awesome. I mean, that's how it happens, right? So someone who's meant to be something other went down a road. I was pre-med once in a time too, and then
were you? I don't remember.
Yeah,
that.
But I fainted the sign of blood, so probably not so much a good thing. So yeah. There we go. Better for me to go on and do what I did.
Yeah. Well, one of the, I would say, almost even the main highlight I thought of this interview was how Ira talked about, working with planners and how, the degree to which they're involved. And he was saying that, generally speaking, he would really advise planners to budget more time for the creative aspect of the process and how he says he feels he needs to sit in the room and feel the ambiance and have some time to work with it to really make it as great as possible. He doesn't just want to set it up and dial it in, but he really needs that time to work with it. And so I thought that was a kind of a key takeaway from this interview.
Yeah, I think what is consistent with like all of the great ones you've had on before, where they are responsible for the entirety of an experience. And I think that it's interesting what he's talking about is that it's about how things move through, and just like how you talk all the time about, being on stage and reading the room and feeling the room and being able to just, move on into the place where it's going to be really effective for the emotion you're talking about. I remember we were talking about Marianne Bennett, and she was talking about something very similar, right? Experiencing energy and moving with that energy, and he's doing the same. It's pretty cool how consistent it is across all the different genres that you interview.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it is really similar. And just for people listening, I wanted to give one example. Like I always like to have, a better understanding of what's behind this. What do we mean? And one of the things Ira said was that, like with haze, for example, which is, I think everyone knows, but just in case, it's like kind of the smog, or rather not the smog, but the smoke, which is what allows us to really see the lights. And in terms of working with haze and in a hazer machine, it really affects the dramatic side of what's going on. And he needs to see how that works. For example, here it is with the airflow in the room. And if he doesn't have that time, that's just one example. If he doesn't have the time to check it out and see how the air is flowing throughout the room, how it affects the haze, which then affects how you see the lights, then, he's having to adjust more during the party. And so that's an example of needing to budget more time to let him, work with the creative side of it all.
Well, yeah, and especially since we're pretty concerned about airflow these days, that it's going to
that too.
deeply affect the party. So yeah, I love that example that he gave, and I love the example too about the ambiance and setting it and making sure that he can react to, like, at dinner, what does it look like, what does it feel like, and he was how does he create lights that would set the mood? So it's another great example.
Yeah, and I mean, and that is what it's all about. I've had just a couple lighting designers on the show, and also my other podcast, The Music Makers. I had this major lighting guy, Leroy Bennett, who, it was funny, Ira mentioned him, he brought him up, but the power or the opportunity that these lighting designers have to really affect the mood, almost choreograph it. And we were talking too about how, coming back to planners again, planners and designers, it kind of varies from one to another, the degree to which they're involved with Ira during the party, and how much of it is. Sometimes he said it's more choreographed and they're using headsets, they're giving signals to each other. Other times the planner, the designer will have all they have to say ahead of time, and then they'll be more kind of holding back during the party and let Ira just run it. So I thought that was interesting too, that there is such a thing as how much does a planner or designer get involved or not with Ira.
Well, yeah, and I think it's also the visual component of what he's doing clearly is what the light is about. But what he's also talking about is having the ability to really be a partner in design, and that's that takes a very because he referred to Colin and to Preston a lot. Right. It takes a very steady hand and someone who's very confident in their own design to see him as a complementary player. So someone that can be brought in early and really be able to draw out a lot of ideas and fluidity to what the design is going to be, and how to then make it happen, of course. So that's what he speaks about a lot, is like being involved earlier than not. And also, kind of tells the story of him being burned by kind of giving out ideas, and then having to bid against himself against those ideas. And that's just an interesting thing to me about the power of his ideas. And, free ideas are worth what you pay for them. So,
yeah. I want to be sure you know the wonderful news of our latest show, Stop and Smell the Roses, with acclaimed lifestyle and event design expert Preston Bailey. Not only will he share the secrets, tools, and technologies behind his extraordinary ability to create a theatrical environment out of any space, you will also discover more about the man behind the magic. Preston will reveal how his focus on personal growth has been the root of his professional success, and you'll have the opportunity for him to answer your questions along the way. Plus, Preston will be inviting onto the show many of the star celebrities he has worked with in the past, so you don't want to miss a single episode. We also have another great show on the Wedding Biz Network, The Business of Being Creative, with host Sean Lowe. Since debuting last May, his show has really taken off, and he's continuing to bring you the creative business advice he's shared with accomplished industry notables. Be sure to take advantage of Sean's talkback opportunity by recording questions and comments from right there in each episode's show notes. So, if you are a creative who is turning your craft into a business or want to take it to another level, head to theweddingbiznetwork.com and take a listen to Stop and Smell the Roses with Preston Bailey and The Business of Being Creative with Sean Lowe. That's theweddingbiznetwork.com. And overall, just the power of lighting to really affect the mood. It's interesting, Sean. So, I've counted, at one time a while ago, I've done in my music company over 1,000 weddings, and that does not include the hundreds and hundreds and maybe even thousands of corporate parties and fundraisers and shows I've done in Vegas and stuff like that. And, it's interesting. I would say most of the events or a good chunk of the events I've seen, I don't see a lot going on with lighting. And so, it's interesting. Like what I mostly see is, and of course, a lot of it is a function of budget. So I get it. But a lot of it is just setting the lights and kind of leaving them, maybe having a little bit of a change. But the kind of work that Ira does, and like you mentioned with Preston and Colin, who he brought up, it's theatrical. It's theater. You're creating theater and moving emotion. I love that.
Me too, and I think that's I haven't done nearly what you have in terms of that event and been at events, but I've noticed it too, and it's the idea that what he was talking about that's so amazing to me, and then a lot of I have been the listener of the other lighting designers you talked about and what they're about, and it's kind of like, and then knowing about lighting design from another level, and even the corporate world that he's talking about, where the perception of lighting design and the elevation of what it is, doing things that are, what did he call it? Not architectural, but
architainment.
Architainment, right? Which I find fascinating, right? So we're really talking about the power of what it is, and then obviously the level of lighting design that exists and people's respect for that.
Yeah.
When they have see so many fantastic lighting shows and look at Vegas and what they do, obviously, and having all of that. I just find it amazing where, that a lot of times for events, it is just an afterthought, right?
Right, it is.
And that is so incredible for me, is to say, wait a second, how did that come to be when lighting design is so deeply respected in so many different areas, and yet kind of like what Ira is saying is like sometimes it just isn't respected, and yet it should be.
Well, and also, no, your point is really good, and also, connected to this is there's an opportunity. I had asked him, what else, and he was saying he'd like to see more work between the lighting and the musical entertainment. Now, I can really relate to that. And he was saying, for example, is the group, if it's a band, are they doing some kind of a dramatic entrance? What is the song sequence? What about the tempo? I mean, there's so much that we can do to tie in lighting, to complement the music, and Sean, I'll tell you, in all the jobs that I have done, I have only had a lighting person and a planner and designer introduce us, make sure we talk, only maybe 7 or 8 times, and each of those times that we did it, and it could be for weddings, but most of the times I've experienced it is with fundraisers and with shows in Vegas. And when I've got the lighting working with me, I mean, it's a whole, I'm almost speechless. It's a whole nother level to bring it to by just having the LD and the head of the music talk ahead of time about it.
God, yeah, I can only imagine. It's just like anything else. It's how we can perceive things, right? And literally, light can shape everything. So having that coordination has to be such a big difference.
Well, and think about concerts. I mean,
God, yeah,
it can make or break the night. Before we go, one more point I want to make on the whole other side of this. Ira told the story of when he did the wedding for LeBron James, or not a wedding. It was some kind of an event. Maybe it was a wedding, but it was an event for LeBron James, and he had a 360-degree seamless projection on walls of the tent so that it felt like it was a giant ballroom in Versailles, and then it changed later to an outdoor garden feel, and then later to more of a nightclub feel. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, that had to be over the top.
Oh, God, yeah, I definitely can imagine. And having, even it's been a long time, but knowing what Preston was about, way back when, and what he can possibly be about now. I mean, it's just it's an oh my God thing. So I can only imagine what the settings that Ira created and how he did it, and could have an experience of an illusion of what could be, even though none of it was real, way before, projection mapping and all the rest. So I can only imagine what he's doing now.
Yeah. Well, Sean, thanks for coming on again to help me talk about an interview. I appreciate it.
You're more than welcome.
Yeah, and everyone, be sure to check out the site of the person we're speaking about, Ira, and his website is levynyc.net. That's LEVYNYC.net. His social media handle on Instagram and Facebook is LevyNYC. And then for Sean, we've got thebusinessofbeingcreative.com. Again, thebusinessofbeingcreative.com. And then on Instagram, we can find you, Sean, at SeanLowe1, the numeral 1, SeanLowe1. And be sure to look for the show. Sean's podcast can be found in a couple different ways. On your cell phone's podcast app, search for The Business of Being Creative, or go to the weddingbiznetwork.com. Again, the weddingbiznetwork.com. That's where you'll find Sean's show, also Preston Bailey's show, and got a couple others I'm going to be announcing soon. And so I want to mention next week's episode. It's going to be with stationer Lisa Zachary, founder and creative director of Papered Wonders. So again, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll catch you next week on The Wedding Biz.